please bear with me as I try to parse this statement, because something quite important here. What Melodum was saying, I believe is that it's myth to imagine that a professional writer, however gifted or experienced, simply sits down at the keyboard and lets the words flow. No, there's another step involved, mediation. There's the author's impulse, which is passionate. Then there's a consideration of the potential audience, which is practical, and the finished piece of work is the offspring of those two factors. Note that I don't call it a compromise. It is not a compromise. Rather it represents the application of several different skills, each of which is an integral part of Melodum's talent. Aside from what we think of as the purely creative aspect, there's the clarity required to understand the marketplace, and the discipline and skill needed to bring one's vision to an audience. Melodum uses all those talents to find his artistic and commercial sweet spot, and most impressively, he does it while always sounding exactly like himself and no one else. Now, if this dynamic applied only to writers, or only to creative types more generally, it might not be worth analyzing here. But I happen to believe that Melodum's statement holds an important lesson for all of us, or certainly for anyone who hopes to turn a passionately held vocation into a livelihood. The lesson put simply is this: when we do something for pay, whether it's writing a story or digging a ditch, we need to please the person paying us, but that doesn't make the work any less our own. our own. The paradox is that the finished product, whatever it happens to be belongs to us as much as to the buyer. We've put our own stamp on it. We've brought our uniqueness to it. Because it is part of what we've done, it has become a part as well of who we are. Accepting this paradox of selling something and yet still possessing it is part of how we become professional. It's part of how we seduce from finding our bliss to doing our bliss. My entry into the world of professional composing was as a writer of music for TV commercials. Advertising, of course, is a field in which creativity and commerce are thoroughly completely intertwined. In fact, the motto of one of the great pioneering agencies, Benton and Bowles, was, "It isn't creative unless it sells." This sentiment may drive certain purists crazy, but they welcome to reality. There were many useful lessons to be learned from writing for commercials and most of them were very humbling. Probably the most basic lesson was this: I had to acknowledge and accept the fact that I was working in a service industry. My music was not an end in itself. It was part of a large conception, and that larger conception was not intended as a work of art, but as a tool for selling a product. Understand? I say this not as a put down or an apology. As with everything else in life, writing for commercials can be done well or done badly. And when it's done well, it takes on dignity and stature. Still, the reality was that I was there to serve the client. Accepting this reality, getting it, was a big part of becoming a professional of turning a vocation into a livelihood. As a corollary to this most basic lesson, I also had to accept that my music, which I poured my heart and soul into, was rarely the most important part of the commercial package. The production was the most important part by far. Next came the imagery, since TV, after all, is primarily a visual medium. A fresh concept or catchy slogan catchy slogan probably catchy slogan probably that came after that. Then there was the music. In the best case, the music played an important supporting role, setting the tone or establishing an attitude. In the worst case, it was simply filler or an afterthought. But here's something I learned and that I believe has application for every working person in every field. No matter how important the music was or wasn't, I had to approach it as if it were the most important part of the process. There were two reasons for this. The first was self-respect. As we've seen, there's a paradox when you do something for pay. You sell it, and yet it remains a part of who you are. If I coasted if I coasted if I coasted on a job, if I allowed myself to believe that my contribution didn't really matter much. I wouldn't just be shortage. I I wouldn't just be shortaging the client's line. I'd be doing myself a disservice. Disservice. I'd be putting I'd be putting something out there that was less than the best I could do, and even if nobody noticed except for me, there would be a certain diminishment in the falling short. A lazy piece of work would linger as a personal embarrassment. The other reason for always behaving as if one's work is all important is more practical. It's the best and maybe the only way to grow as a professional. Life is school. Every gig is an opportunity to learn. Every challenge every challenge every challenge presented presented by the world offers us a chance to hone our skills and bring our perceptions into clearer focus. I have a sort of Buddhist I have a sort of Buddhist image that applies, I think, in this connection. Sharpening a knife, sharpening a knife. The knife is each of us. The outside world, with its demands and expectations, is the whetting stone, the grinding wheel. The only way we can keep our edge is to submit to the friction of stone. This takes a certain courage because the stone is huge, and its grading is relentless. It also takes a certain humility and humility and understanding that the wheel will keep on turning long after our own little substance has been all used up. To get the greatest benefit, the keenest edge from the collision of knife and wheel, a certain mix of passive and active is called for. We have to surrender ourselves to the friction of the wheel, but we also have to hold our ground, mindfully position ourselves at the proper angle and with the proper firmness, so that the steel rings sparks of creativity and passion and commitment, and we come away improved and refreshed. But okay, in the literal day-to-day world of work, the friction that makes the sparks fly comes not from a grinding wheel, but from our interactions with other people. This is because working for pay necessarily implies a relationship. In fact, a whole matrix of relationships, and the way we deal with those relationships with bosses, colleagues, clients, goes a long way toward determining not only our level of professional success, but also the degree of comfort with which we're able to balance the sometimes conflicting demands of ego and career. Let me try to illustrate some aspects of this dynamic by example. I tend to be extremely self-critical. I'm seldom, if ever, entirely satisfied with anything I've done. But sometimes in my early writing for commercials, I would come up with a tune or a sound that I just plain fell in love with. I'd go into a meeting with the client feeling entirely confident that I had nailed it, and sometimes the client didn't like what I'd done. Sometimes the client hated it. Sometimes the client thought that the exact part I was in love with was the part that didn't work. Well, how does one deal with a situation like that? other than by greeting one's teeth teeth and getting a bellyache. Human nature being what it is, there's a probably universal impulse to react defensively. I know I'm right. That guy must really be a jerk. An understandable response, but where does it get you? In the short term, it probably gets you fired. More important in the longer term, de- it deprives you of an opportunity to learn. Maybe the client isn't a jerk. Maybe he understands. Maybe he understands things about the business yet that you have yet to figure out. Maybe he was a broader perspective than you have yet to attain. And and maybe if you truly open up and listen to what he has to say rather than getting defensive and insulted. Maybe the process will make you better at what you do. Again, what's calling for in situations like this is one of those balancing acts on which so much of our happiness and self-respect depends. We have to balance ego ego against the legitimate demands of working relationships. Our lives are our own. Our work is our own, but to a considerable extent, it is the outside world that defines us. If we don't openly and honestly consider the feedback we are getting from the world, how can we really know how we're doing, if we're accomplishing anything of value, if we're accomplishing anything at all. So, for example, I had to learn that my own into enthusiasm for a song or a musical conception, while it was a necessary part of doing a job well, was not the was not the was not the be all and end all. Other people had to love it too, and if they didn't, I had to be prepared to change it or to stick it in a drawer and start over. But here's the thing. I found that if I resist the feedback if I didn't uh, succumb succumb to frustration or hurt feelings. I almost always ended up with something better than I had started with, and I also realized that I owed a debt of gratitude to the clients, colleagues who led me to the eventual finished music, even when the path to it was rocky. Listening to them, honoring our relationship had made me better. Writing music is essentially a solitary activity. A tune or rhythm or a pattern mysteriously forms in the composer's mind, itself resolves itself into notes that can be that can be played on a keyboard or written on a staff, and only then can it be shared with others. But if composing is solitary, composing for for a living is necessarily collaborative. This is yet another paradox, another potential source of conflict or frustration at the point at the point where where the self rubs up against the outside world. When does a piece of kiss cease music cease being mine and become theirs? How do I deal with the often painful process of letting it go? Go. Freud Freud would call the desire to hold on an example of infantile anal retentiveness. Maybe so, maybe not. But the tug of it is undeniable. The conflict is this: once I've created something, I don't like other people to mess with it. But once I've solved something other people have an entirely legitimate stake in it. How can we resolve this conflict? In the early years of my career, I used I used to dread those inevitable moments when a client would be standing next to me, literally looking over looking over my shoulders as I sat at the keyboard and would ask me to come up with something for this, or give us something sort of Latin for that, or suggest how about something more upbeat over here. Uh, faced faced with this barrage of input and pressure of expectation, I would feel a wave of anxiety that I tried my best not to show. But my mouth would go dry. My mind would go blank. I'd look down at the familiar keyboard, and for a moment it would seem like a stranger. Usually I'd manage to come up with something suitable. That was my job after all. But the process was agony. Process was agony. Over time, it became easier. Why? Because by experience, rather than by uh, conscious thought. I'd undergone a simple but profound attitude adjustment. In the early years when I was asked to compose on the fly, I'd see the process as a duality. I was being asked to perform. Being asked to perform while she the client was making demands. I was being asked to create what I was being asked to create while she was ready to judge. With more experience and gradually growing confidence, however, I came to understand that my way of looking at this was neither productive nor accurate. When it came to the task at hand, it wasn't a case of I and she. The point was that we were trying to get something done together. We were teammates, adverse not adversaries. I needed to respect her contribution to the process, but in order to do that, I needed to relax to conquer my own insecurity. I needed to understand that my work was still my own, maybe even more my own, when I yielded my sole claim to it and allowed it to become collaborative. I stress this dynamic and this transition because to believe I have I happen to believe that all work is first and foremost solitary effort. Even the most apparently seamless teamwork starts with individuals doing their very best and then making common cause with their fellow workers. Have you ever watched the full credits that roll at the end of a movie? Hundreds of people have labored to bring that film to the screen. A more thoroughly collaborative project can hardly be imagined. Still, still at the moment of performing their separate tasks, each and every person has worked alone. Every person has put something of him or herself into the product. Every person has a stake of professionalism and pride pride as it is on a film set, so it is in a school or a clinic or a foundation, in any setting where a number of people work both separately and together to accomplish a goal that encompasses the passions and aspirations of them all. Through cooperation and teamwork, people can do things that are bigger and grander than any individual. But the teamwork comes together only if people bring their uniqueness and their special talents to the effort. Each person gives something, and each person still owns what he or she has given. This realization is, I believe, a crucial bridge between finding our bliss and doing our bliss. Finding our bliss is essentially a journey of self discovery, where do our talents lie? What are the things we truly care about? What pursuits allow us to feel that we are being truest to ourselves, living the lives that we were meant to live. Doing our bless entails a somewhat different sort of journey, a journey beyond ourselves. These talents and abilities, we've discovered how do they connect with the world outside our skin. What does the world what does the world need from us? Where is the all important intersection between the things we value in ourselves and the things the world will value from us. Finding that intersection is one of life's great challenge, and if we are fortunate enough to locate it, and even more fortunate to be able to earn our livings there, then that gives us our very best chance at fulfillment in our work. 8. Portals of Discovery. A man of genius makes no mistakes. His errors are volitional and are the portals of discovery. James Joyce wrote that in reference to Shakespeare. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true when it comes to genius. Who knows? Who knows? But the rest of us make plenty of mistakes, and not intentionally either. We make mistakes because we are human. We are human. We make mistakes because of knowing too little. We make mistakes because of imagining we know more than we do. We make mistakes when we neglect the importance of a moment. Of a moment. We make mistakes when we think only of the moment. We make mistakes when we become impatient. Equally, we make mistakes when we are indecisive. There are foolish acts. There are foolish failures to act. We make mistakes out of boldness. We make mistakes out of timidity. We make mistakes when we are overly ambitious, and when we are not ambitious enough. We make mistakes when we let our actions become detached from our values. Just the mistakes come from many causes. They come in all shapes and size. There are tiny gaffes that embarrass us for a moment or two. There are major blunders that fill us with chagrin and remorse for years or even decades. But whatever their origin and whatever their scale, there is one thing that all our errors have in common. They are opportunities to learn. They are portals of discovery, not only for geniuses, but for the rest of us as well. When we come up with the wrong answer to one of life's innumerable questions, we are at least one step closer to a right answer, or at least the answer that's right for us. When we let ourselves down by inattention or lack of conviction, the twinge we feel is a healthy reminder to maintain our standards and our vigilance. When we goof and confront the consequences of our goofing, we have the opportunity to figure out what doesn't work and why. In short, we grow by messing up. I stress this because I've observed that, especially in difficult or uncertain times, many people seem terribly afraid of making mistakes, as if a mistake were a personal humiliation from which one would never recover, the dreaded black mark on the permanent record. But that's just not how it is. Mistakes are very seldom permanent. Most of them can be fixed with less difficulty and drama than one imagines, and there's nothing shameful about making them. There is, however, something sad and limiting about the fear of making them. If we let ourselves be controlled by the fear of stumbling, we can walk only the widest, most trod paths. If we refuse to cut ourselves some slack for messing up, then we'll be disinclined to take chances, and if we don't take chances, we may never find our passion or our truest selves. If we're afraid that the bit of our own drummer might lead us to a misstep, then we can only march along with everybody else. And you know what? Even even if we play, and you know what? Even if we play it, even if we play it as safe as we possibly can, we'll make mistakes anyway. Everybody does. Mistakes are inevitably. They are a part of life. If life is what we make it, and if we want our lives to be vivid and authentic, then we have to accept the fact that we will no mess up mess up now and then along the way. We can't eliminate errors, so we may as well embrace them, admit them when they happen, forgive ourselves for making them, and most of all, learn from them. No mistake should go to waste. Let me tell you a story about two brothers. They grew up in California in comfortable, though not wealthy circumstances. Uh, their their father was an their father was an engineer who worked for a private private firm under contract to NASA. Their mother was a teacher who suspended her career during their childhood, then became a tutor in English as a second language. But it was engineering that seemed to set the template for appropriate careers. The father had worked for the same company for decades. He had stability, security, paid vacations, and benefits. He worked hard, but for the most part, he seemed blessedly free of the stresses and uncertainties that go with many professions. However, he still seemed to get a kick out of what he did for a living. He would talk with almost childlike enthusiasm about the extraordinary elegance of an airplane wing, or the mind-boggling thrust of a rocket engine. The sons seemed to inherit some but not all of the father's abilities. They were both very bright. Math and science came especially easily to them. In terms of academic leanings, they seemed perfectly suited to follow in their father's footsteps and become engineers. but something was missing. That something was passion. For the father, engineering was exciting and fulfilling. For the sons, it was simply the default mode, the expected choice. It accepted choice. It seemed the safest option, the path least likely to lead to a mistake. One of the brothers Jeff eased onto that more trodden path and became an electrical engineer. This was during the 1990s, and electrical engineering was a very good ticket to have. He went to work. He went to work for a software company and started making a very nice living. He didn't love his work. He didn't hate it. It was just what he did. It was fine. The the other brother then resisted the tug of the accepted choice. He wasn't really sure what he wanted to do, and this caused his family a lot of anxiety and caused then a lot of difficulty. He didn't stick with things. He kept changing his mind. He made mistakes. He got an engineering degree but then didn't want to use it. He flirted with the idea of becoming a chef, but came to feel that although he was fascinated by the inner workings of restaurants, it wasn't the food itself that held his interest. Great, so now he had a degree he wasn't using and some work experience he didn't care to follow up on. Mistakes and more mistakes. The 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 millennium came. The dot coms crashed, and Jeff, the more reliable brother, lost his job. This was not his fault. Like so many other people, he was caught in an economic downdraft, and that no one had been able to foresee or seemed able to control. Still, getting that pink slip demanded a revaluation of many of the choices Jeff had made. It was a difficult but really interesting process. He says of this revaluation. My first thought was that my mistake was getting fired. That was only natural, right?
One day I had a job, next day I didn't. Losing the job was where I goofed, but then I realized that wasn't it at all. Getting fired wasn't the mistake. That was only the occasion for considering the mistake. The real mistake was taking that job in the first place. Why did I take it? I was never that excited about it. I took it because I imagined it was safe. Because it would save me the trouble and anxiety of thinking too much about other possibility. My mistake was in imagining my mistake was in imagining I could avoid mistakes. A painful acknowledgement. But again, mistakes are temporary setbacks, not permanent disasters. Course corrections rather than defeats. And if there's any good news about an economic downdraft, whether it's the dot-com crash or the financial crisis of more recent years, it's that though times force many people into necessary reevaluations that lead in the long term to more fulfilling lives.